Hey everybody. So I wanted to make this incredibly beautiful video for you, but my setup uh, didn't want me to set that up today, so I'm just making this video for you. The topic today that I wanted to talk about is no self, or the role of the self with a small s, or the role of the ego in non-dual meditation. And I want to do this as a dialogue, so I'm going to do this very short video, like less than 5 minutes, and then let's see what your questions are, and then I'll make another video, maybe with a different setup, or maybe with the same setup, that answers your questions, so that we can have a kind of a video dialogue going here. That sounds like fun, doesn't it? Woo! So there's a lot of confusion and a lot of, I think, unhelpful ideas, and maybe even ideas that are leading people astray, and things that just cause more confusion than clarity around the idea of the ego. And so let's just talk about this from my viewpoint, and a practice viewpoint that's coming from traditions like Non-Dual Shiva Tantra or Mahamudra or Dzogchen, rather than other traditions, because this is not a monolithic way of working. It's not like there's just one view about this. I think there can be this way of talking that comes from some of the traditions, that the ego is a total fantasy, it is non-existent, and therefore kind of must be seen through, or even like destroyed, or like chopped down, and that somehow you're going to then go forward into the world without an ego. And we'll let those traditions talk for themselves, but I don't see it this way. Yes, of course, the ego is a construction. Yes, we even watch it being constructed in people developmentally from the time they're a little child. If you have your own children, or someday when you do have children, you will, if that occurs, you will see them in the process of ego formation. It's a thing that we build over time. So it's obviously a construction. It is not some kind of essence. Even though people, you will see with children that they do kind of come with sort of a personality already installed. There is some of that there. But over time, developmentally, we build this thing called the ego and add layers of ego on over time. And so, yes, it's a construction. And we can see through that construction, and we can see that, whatever the greater, let's say, awareness, or whatever the greater organism, or whatever the greater experience was, that was, kind of the framework, even the groundless ground for building that ego, is the actual identity, if we want to call it that, non-identity, whatever. But that's where we really exist, and the ego is like our, persona, our mask that we use to navigate the world of human society. And of course, the necessary twin of the ego is the shadow, all the stuff that doesn't help us navigate society, or that gets in the way, but and is somehow inappropriate. It doesn't have to be negative, difficult stuff. It's just things that society doesn't want to deal with. Gets put into kind of the other bin called the shadow. But in any case, so we see that we have this structure of thought and feeling and body sensation and apparent location and all that we can call an ego. And it can often sound like we're supposed to get rid of that, or destroy it, or that it's the enemy, or that somehow it is a bad thing. And, of course, in meditation retreat, in deep meditation, sometimes in other experiences, through trauma, through car accidents, through drugs, through all kinds of things, we can have the experience of the ego not being there for a while, actually disappearing. And that can be quite a relief. That can be quite pleasant. And, sometimes that's total, sometimes it's partial, sometimes it lasts just for a moment, sometimes it lasts for a long time. But that can give us the sense of like, oh, I'm not my ego. And of course, that's an important realization, right? That's a very important, you want to remember that. You want to remember that. I'm not my ego. But of course, when we then come back to try to deal with people, try to work in society, try to have jobs and relationships and hobbies and do stuff, there's an important role for the ego. We need some kind of structure that helps us interact with humans, that helps us, not just come off as like some kind of void zombie. And so egos are really useful and important, with a couple of caveats. One, as I was mentioning, it has to be stunningly clear, over and over and over again, stunningly clear. I am not my ego. And it's not just something you know intellectually, it's something you've experienced in your bones. Because otherwise, what will happen is when the ego starts to either, vanish temporarily or be seen through more permanently, we will experience that as death. We will or like we're approaching death, and we can get really panicky about it because we have our identity in the ego and the ego is dissolving. But once we have the experience, maybe over and over and over again, of the ego either dissolving totally or dissolving partially, or simply being seen through as a construction, being seen through as empty, when that happens over and over again, you recognize nothing bad happened. I didn't die. I didn't get annihilated. I didn't go away. Awareness, experience, Buddha nature, the source, whatever we want to call it, was still completely there, and in fact was having a better time than we typically do when we're locked into ego identification, which is a very tight straitjacket and a very narrow, constricted, unpleasant thing if we have it as an identity. It is, in fact, we can see why we might think of it as a bad thing, because that's where all the suffering comes from, is trying to take this, absolutely boundless, timeless, centerless awakeness that is spontaneous and joyous and just effulgent with meaning and with creativity and all that, and pack it into this little weird straitjacket, sock puppet thing of ego. And so we want to see through that, and we want to see through that deeply and clearly and repeatedly till we no longer identify as this ego being, right? We don't ever identify as that again. But, you don't identify with your liver function very much. You don't identify with your heart function as a pump, very much. But it's still important. It's still doing its job. We want it to do its job, and we don't want it to just, I don't need a heart function anymore. I don't need a liver anymore. Well, yeah, you do. And in the same way, unless you're just going to sit in a cave, which is fine. Some people, that's their lot. That's their deal in life, is to sit in a cave. But most of us, that is not our deal. We were not born into this society to do stuff like that. We're going to get out there. We're going to do things with people. We're going to, make stuff and do stuff and have families and have careers, and maybe many careers and many interactions. And for that, not only do we need heart function and liver function, but having ego function going on is fine. It's necessary. It's beautiful. But two things. Again, we don't identify as it, at least not in any permanent way. We can temporarily inhabit it, but it's not who we are. And also when it is seen as, continuously arising empty appearance that is this effulgent, exquisite expression of the source, we can, to use really relative dualistic language, we can improve it. We can have a much better ego with fewer crappy edges and so on. It makes it much easier to, if we're not in the death grip of this is who I am and this is who I am and this is who I am, we can actually begin to improve our ability to function in the world, because we have a much looser, more open, more like, oh yeah, I'm improving my muscular function by lifting weights, or I'm improving my cardiovascular stuff by working out, or improving my lung function by doing pranayama or whatever. In the same way, I can improve my ego function in a whole bunch of ways that are no longer threatening, because it's not my identity, it's just this thing, right, that is arising, that helps, that is there for people, that is there for because we are social beings, you know. So the ego is not something that needs to go away. I don't even think, unless you're alone all the time, I don't even think it can go away unless you just kind of, you know, pretend to be void all the time or something. It's got to arise the minute you start speaking, the minute you start interacting. Personality elements are being co-created. You know, it's a social construction, social co-construction, right? So it's always going to be there. We just don't want to believe it's us. This is the important point. This is like what I would call first level awakening. Don't believe that's you. And have a deep, clear, absolutely fundamental experience that, sure, ego is something that arises within you. Ego is something that beautifully, you know, is the brocade of the shimmering, glowing existence of the creativity of the source. It's there, but it's not my identity. That's what we want to get to, or notice, or, you know, recognize, to begin our journey of non-dual awakening. So that's what I want to say today. Let me know if you have questions about that. Put the questions in the comments. And then if any of those are interesting or I have something to say about them, I'll make another video, okay? So thanks for listening to me rant today about this topic, and hope to hear from you. So have a great one.